My name is Victoria Balogan-Fatokun from the UKZN Law School in Pietermaritzburg, KZN, and my co-presenter is my colleague from the Delahuma Center in Cape Town at the University of Western Cape. The title of our paper is The Sexual Exploitation of Children and Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, a case study of South Africa. The outcome and the focuses of this paper is basically to describe and where possible try to understand and recognize the nature of different dynamics of sexual exploitation of children and child abuse that we can see around us. Also to try and recognize that where children are exploited for sex, there is found to be some kind of compounded health issues which could exacerbate the vulnerability and the survival ability of the children that's being targeted in this way. Also, we'll try to recognize that or recognize some of the factors that impact their sexuality, which could determine their sexual health status, including their reproductive and reproduction health and rights. We'll also try to see or try to understand some of the factors that hinder or stops children and their families, from overcoming some of these abuses that we see by trying to map the pathways which impact on sexual exploitation and abuse in the country and beyond. So statistics shows us that 1 in every 4 girls and 1 in every 6 boys would have been exploited or sexually molested before the age of 18, and that 1 in every 6 women would have been sexually assaulted at a point in their lifetime. And 3 in every 4 children would have been subjected to some kind of sexual abuse within a family environment or by a family member. These stats are worrying. Approximately 2.78 million men have been sexually assaulted or have an encounter that would be regarded as some kind of sexual violation. But the problem, however, is men hardly disclose, and this goes to boys also. Children below the age of 17 make up 71% of all the sex crimes that is reported in the country. And this once again points us to the fact that our children are very, very vulnerable. In South Africa, 17.4% of the total population of the entire country actually falls between 10 and 19 years old. What we have also seen from literature is that majority of these youngsters would have been exposed to some kind of sexual encounter at a very young age. And we also see the increase in teenage pregnancy, which of course, without the necessary care, services, and assistance that is needed, could prove fatal if pregnancies are clandestinely, targeted to be gotten rid of. Now, evidence also shows us that 49.5% of this population that we've just identified are females, and they would seek medical assistance. However, often they do not give a full details of what is resulting or is responsible for the underlying ill health that's been presented. So for instance, if a 12-year-old or 14-year-old present with HIV AIDS symptoms at the clinic, now it will be nice to know how he or she has contracted this infection of course, which is manageable. So certainly no longer, I mean, it's no longer death threat. But the problem is we often find out that such disclosure is not often given because sometimes the abuse has been going on for so long that the child might not even necessarily know when exactly he or she contracted the infection. Also, when a girl child, for instance, is sexually violated at quite an early age, or which could result in unwanted pregnancy, there could be some inflammation or infection or pressure on the pelvis that could also impact on the other part of the body. And sometimes by the time the symptoms begins to show, it might be also difficult for this young chap to be able to say when the inflammation or the infection set in. And this also could be compounded by any other sexual offense, sexual transmitted diseases that could have happened along the way. Research also shows us that 80% of the children who have been sexually exploited have some kind of symptoms that points towards, post-traumatic stress disorders, which could lead to make them running away from home, developing some kind of mental health issues, turning to drugs, etc. And all these issues, when coupled together, actually could impact on a child's ability to proceed or to develop successfully. The WHO has taken its time along the way, over the years, to try and define what sexual abuse is, and it defines it as the involvement of a child in sexual activity that he or she does not fully comprehend and, of course, is unable to give informed consent to, or for which the child is not developmentally prepared, or else that violates the society's law or the social taboo. And one of the things that we need to understand is that often there's that understanding or misconception that a child would consent to sexual encounter. A child is not in a position to process the complexity of approval that goes with sexual intercourse, and therefore a child cannot consent because mentally this child cannot just process or comprehend this whole chemistry. And often when kids are being groomed, they are made to feel comfortable with advancement from an adult that is manipulating the process or the environment to take advantage of the child. So often you find that in the UK, for instance, we have over 2,500 of children that's been subjected to different types of sexual exploitation. And this, is like year in, year out. And often the bulk of the reports would come from children who've been violated in what's supposed to be a safe environment, that is a private setting, that is their homes where they're supposed to be comfortable. Over approximately 70,000 online images of child abuse were shared in the UK in 2012 alone. Of course, this is 2022, but we can see that over the years, these numbers have grown so broadly that some of these violations have almost become, normal in some society, that we are no longer worrying about what these activities are doing to the children and what the consequences will be in the long run to all our communities individually or collectively. It is important to understand or conceptualize sexual exploitation and children in light of sexual and reproductive health rights, because when a child is being violated, the child is being used as a sexual tool to satisfy the need of the perpetrator. And therefore, biologically, a child is created to grow and understand and mature into a specific model. And what sexual abuse does is that often it distorts the chemical and the psychological balance that a child is supposed to have. This is highly consequential for a child because often the conception of what sexuality is, sexual interaction is, reproduction is, and the right and the health that goes with this can be wrongly influenced, which could have a significant impact on the child. So is South Africa relaxed or not worried about protecting its children? No. In chapter 2 of the Constitution, we will see that the country has made an effort to protect its children as it would protect that of an individual, an adult individual. Of course, often the perpetrator will be somebody older than the child. So if they have their rights protected, the same Constitution protects the rights of the child. And if we read if we read chapter 2 of the Constitution with section 27 of the Constitution and section 28 of the Constitution, we will see that the law, the rule of law in the country does not tolerate sexual exploitation of children. So in the last 26 years, South Africa has actually tried as much as possible to fulfill and to protect its children. However, as we all know, when it comes to sexual exploitation, syndicates and individuals that rely on this channel of abusing children will find a way around it. So South Africa has actually ratified quite a number of treaties that will translate, of course, set out to protect children, and one of them is the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And in terms of Article 34 of this particular treaty, it is obvious and implicitly stated that there should be no unlawful engagement in sexual activities with the child. No practices such as prostitution, anything, performances, materials, pornography, but these are the things that we are seeing in our societies. Equally, Article 27 of the African Charter on the Rights and the Welfare of the Child prohibits the abuse of children. If we read this together with the general comments number 7 on the same Article 27, it calls on the states to prioritize protecting children, the protection of children, and South Africa has done this. In fact, Section 106 of the Sexual Offences Amendment Act 41 of 2007 does not hold back in its response against the violence against children. Also in 2013, South Africa passed the Pakotip legislation which combats human trafficking, and in this legislation it is echoed once again that it is important that there should be no sexual offenses of any nature, or exploitation of any nature committed against any children in the Republic. This was actually founded on the Sexual Offences Act, the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, which is, of course, the criminal law provision. Section 1 of the Children's Act equally describes that, well, children should not be exploited for labor. We know that this also happens. And if you look at 1B, it says that, well, children should not be put in a place where their well-being or education or physical or mental health or spiritual, moral, emotional, social development will be compromised. All this is violated where a child is sexually molested. So is there a link between sexual exploitation of children and sexual and reproductive health? Yes, there is. Where children are violated, it causes a confusion or commotion, an imbalance between how the child is supposed to develop without this negative, or ill health that would come or that could be associated to the sexual exploitation. Also, children often or at times would develop high-risk behaviors which could further compromise them. They lack autonomy and therefore unable to enjoy their sexual and reproductive health rights, which is contrary to what the Constitution or any other enabling legislation would have provided for. Victims are often silenced because there is lack of support, or because, well, they could be blamed for having made some wrong decision, and therefore their sexual and reproductive health issues and concerns could be aggravated. Section 27 of the Constitution provides for the right to health. And if we look at the authority of the Minister of Health versus the Treatment Action Campaign, it is no longer a debate that sexual and reproductive health rights forms part of our right to health. Also, of course, the right to health is well established through many other cases, particularly if you look at the 2001 decision of the Constitutional Court in the Grootboom case. Now, when we talk about sexual and reproductive health rights, there are so many legislations at the local levels, regional levels, and at the international levels, various human rights treaties that speaks to this. But of utmost importance is the protocol to the African Charter on human and people's rights, which is famously known as the Women's Protocol or the Maputo Protocol. The WHO has not kept silence also. Over and over again in the last few years, it has echoed and tried to get us to understand what sexuality is, what sexual health is, and what reproductive health right is. And when we look at the description of sexuality, it does say that, well, people should not exercise their sexuality in an irresponsible manner that could expose them to ill health, which of course will diminish their ability to enjoy the highest attainable standard of health, which they have been geared to enjoy. And this means that, well, biologically, people will be susceptible to sexually transmitted diseases. Are this not what we are seeing in children? Children groomed to enjoy sex when they should actually be growing up to be children. So all these consequences impact on the child's ability to develop the way a child would develop. Sexual health. This is also important because individuals are expected to live free of diseases. So whether it be mental health issues, psychological, psychiatric issues, physical issues, it does not matter what the ill health manifests or presents itself in or through or as, the child will not be able or may not be able to enjoy its fullest health. And this is not what it's supposed to be. What about reproductive health? Over and over again, we find children, especially the girl child, conceiving. Often we want to worry about the pregnancy, but what about what is going on before the pregnancy or behind the pregnancies? Also, the fact that a child is not pregnant does not mean that this child has not been sexually molested or violated. There are a whole lot of other health issues that could come out even though the child is not expressly pregnant or showing any sign of pregnancy. What can we do? Well, it will be important for parents to be probably more involved and to be conscious of emotional blackmails that could come out of the children being videoed or the children be negligent on their own and sharing videos with the wrong people. They also need to understand that in as much as they are allowed to be kids, they should also have the ability to open up and talk to their parents where they have, or their guardians, where they have concerns or where they are uncomfortable with somebody that is in their environment. So what will perpetrators do? They take advantage. They're very manipulative and they take advantage, and they will go for a child that is being targeted, regardless of whether the child is able to say yes or no. Let's not forget that consent to sexual intercourse with a child is actually doesn't hold water. So they look for the weakness and then they go for that weakness. How do we keep our children safe? Well, promote mutual respect, encourage healthy relationships, where it's possible. Teach children actually also to be to use social medias in a very healthy manner, and of course encourage them to be very conscious of their environment. And often I laugh at this point that I've just made, and I need to quickly clarify it, because we often say to kids, you know what, you just need to be careful of strangers. But we need to know that evidence also shows that the bulk of the violation happens within an environment of with somebody that the child is often very comfortable with. So as we will warn our children against strangers, let's also remember to be conscious of those that we trust our children with. And therefore, let's not continue to feel or act like our environments are safe when the children are compromised at every minute. So I thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.